You're gonna be nothing, kid.
Confirmation. Oh, I see what you're saying. So take this out.
Go quick, please.
Yeah, like my coach on my
Okay.
All-Star team when
Thank
we
you.
lost the final game. We were going to be national champs. Babe Ruth and he puts his arm around me. We're walking up the field. I said, Eric, 30 seconds, we're going to get a PO. Okay, coach. Pennsylvania and everything. You know, in the world of small coincidences, the team that beat us is Red Springs, Wisconsin, which is a suburb of Milwaukee.
And is that where you get the baseball, the signed autographed baseball?
That coach was the one that collected those autographed baseballs and gave them to his former players. So he had coached from Little League right on up to American Legion. So a huge span.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Zebulon Board of Commissioners meeting, October the 2nd, 2023. And we will have the Pledge of Allegiance. We're honored to have the Boy Scouts of Troop 524 here to lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance. They come forward, please.
She's going to ask about this. She's going to ask about this. She's going to ask about this.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Troop. Next, we will have the approval of the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda.
We have a second.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Laux. All in favor? Motion passes. Next, we have school recognition. Daniel Antonio Vasquez. Daniel is not here. Well, I will read the recognition. Zebulon Middle School student Daniel Antonio Vasquez is a student from the Zebulon Gifted and Talented Magnet Middle School. He's 12 years old. He's been living in Knightdale most of his life. 3 of his hobbies are taking a lot of trips, spending time with his aunt, and building Lego sets. Reasons why he loves Zebulon Middle Schools are because of the diverse opportunities in education. It has the best teachers in the country, and the counselors are very supportive in any way you need. He feels very safe and cared for at Zebulon Middle School. Daniel's always tried to set a good example for others to follow. He translates for Zebulon Middle School students who cannot speak English well enough yet. Daniel is an amazing student who likes to continue to learn and become greater in all the things he experiences. The town of Zebulon recognizes Daniel Antonio Vasquez as Zebulon Middle School for being an outstanding student and a role model for other students. October 12th, signed Mayor Glenn L. York. get this to Daniel. Next, teacher Ashley Smith. Malcolm X once stated, education is the passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. Mrs. Smith comes to Zebulon Middle School ready to shape and transform the lives of the students that encounters every day, single life every day. Ms. Smith's passion and love for teaching is showcased in her classroom, which is welcoming, inviting to everyone who enters her class. She continues to help our students find passion in literature every day in her classroom. When Mrs. Smith is not teaching, she's a coach for the girls' cheerleading team. Additionally, she is the co-chair of our school improvement team. Ms. Smith is always there to greet you with a warm smile and welcoming spirit. We are happy to have Ms. Smith touching and impacting the lives of our students at Zebulon Gifted and Talented Magnet Middle School, the Center of Advanced Student Studies and STEM. The town of Zebulon recognizes Ashley Smith as Zebulon Middle School for her exceptional service and commitment to her students. This is signed October the 2nd, 2023, Mayor Glenn L. York. Proclamations. We have a few tonight, and I've asked the commissioners to help me out with these. And we'll start with Fire Prevention Week. Commissioner Laux.
It's my honor to read the proclamation for Fire Prevention Week. Whereas the town of Zebulon is committed to ensuring the safety and security of all those living in and visiting our community. And whereas fire is a serious public safety concern, both locally and nationally, and homes are the locations where people are at greatest risk from fire. And whereas home fires caused more than 2,800 civilian deaths in the United States in 2021, according to the National Fire Protection Association, and fire departments in the United States responded to more than 338,000 home fires. And whereas cooking is a leading cause of home fires in the United States, and fire departments respond to more than 1,066,400 annually between 2016 and 2020. Whereas 2 of every 5 home fires start in the kitchen, with 31% of these fires resulting from unattended cooking. And whereas more than half of reported non-fatal home cooking injuries occurred when victims tried to fight the fire themselves. Whereas children under 5 face a higher risk of non-fire burns associated with cooking than being burned in a cooking fire. Whereas residents of Zebulon should turn pot handles toward the back of the stove, always keep a lid nearby when cooking, keep a 3-foot kid-free zone around the stove, oven, and other things that could get hot. Watch what they heat and set a timer to remind them that they are cooking. Whereas working smoke alarms cut the risk of dying in reported home fire almost in half. Whereas National Park Service Park structural fire coordinators and structural firefighters are dedicated to reducing the occurrence of home fires and home fire injuries through prevention and protection education. And whereas National Park Service employees and visitors are responsive to public education measures and are able to take personal steps to increase their safety from fire, especially in their homes. And whereas the 2023 fire prevention theme is cooking safety. Now, therefore, the Zebulon Board of Commissioners does hereby proclaim October 8th through October 14th, 2023 as Fire Prevention Week, and we urge everyone to check their kitchens and cooking spaces for fire hazards and use safe cooking practices and support the Zebulon Fire Department.
Thank you, Commissioner Laux. Do we need a motion to approve the proclamation? Just proclamation. Thank you. Next, we will have the National Community Planning Month. Commissioner Clark.
National Community Planning Month proclamation. Whereas change is constant and affects all cities, towns, suburbs, counties, boroughs, townships, rural areas, and other places, and whereas the town of Zebulon and such of the region is growing in such an unprecedented pace, and whereas community planning and plans can help manage this change in a way that provides better choices for how people work and live, and whereas community planning provides an opportunity for all residents to be meaningfully involved in making choices that determine the future of their community, and whereas the full benefits of planning requires public officials and citizens who understand, support, and demand excellence in planning and plan implementation, and whereas the month of October is designated as National Community Planning Month throughout the United States of America and its territories, and whereas the American Planning Association endorses National Community Planning Month as an opportunity to highlight how planning is essential to recovery and how planners can lead communities to equitable, resilient, and long-lasting recovery, and whereas the celebration of National Community Planning Month gives us the opportunity to publicly recognize the participation and dedication of the members of planning commissions and other citizen planners who have contributed their time and expertise to the improvement of the town of Zebulon. And whereas we recognize the many valuable contributions made by professional community and regional planners of the town of Zebulon, and extend our heartfelt thanks for the continued commitment to public service by these professionals. Now therefore be it resolved that the month of October 2023 is hereby designated as Community Planning Month in the town of Zebulon in conjunction with the celebration of National Community Planning Month, adopted this second day of October 2023, Glenn L. York, Mayor.
Thank you. Next, Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month. Commissioner Harrison.
Thank you. Proclamation in recognition of Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month. Whereas pregnancy and infant loss is such a common occurrence, one that is usually not recognized. Whereas many North Carolina parents and families have suffered a miscarriage, a stillbirth, or the death of an infant during delivery or shortly after birth. And whereas even the shortest lives are still valuable, and the grief of those who mourn the loss of these lives should not be trivialized. And whereas the town of Zebulon wishes to acknowledge the profound grief experienced by families who suffer the death of a baby. And whereas those parents and families require support and understanding during their time of grief. And whereas increased awareness of the causes and impacts surrounding pregnancy and infant loss may lead to greater understanding, support, and resources in communities across Wake County and the state of North Carolina. And whereas the town of Zebulon acknowledges the need to increase the awareness of pregnancy and infant loss and honor the experiences of families. And whereas we demonstrate our support for the many families affected by such loss. And whereas recognizing the month of October as Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month and the 15th day of October 2023 as Pregnancy and Infant Loss Remembrance Day would enable the people of Zebulon to consider how, as individuals and communities, they can meet the need of bereaved mothers, fathers, and family members and work to prevent the causes of these deaths. Now, be it therefore resolved that I, Mayor Glenn York of the town of Zebulon, do hereby proclaim October 2023 as Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month and October 15th as Pregnancy and Infant Loss Remembrance Day in the town of Zebulon, and encourage parents, caregivers, and all residents to become educated in opportunities to present pregnancy and infant loss and support bereaved families when prevention is not possible. Adopted this second day of October 2023, Glenn L. York, Mayor.
Thank you. Next, 2023 Year of the Trail, Commissioner Baxter.
First off, everybody get outside and get on a trail. Enjoy it. The weather's perfect. Whereas North Carolina's natural beauty is critical to its residents' quality of life, health, and economic well-being, and whereas the trails that span across our state are an integral part of the recreational possibilities in North Carolina and promote an enjoyment of scenic beauty by our residents and our visitors, and whereas the parks, greenways, trails, and natural areas across our state are welcoming to all and provide a common ground for North Carolinians of all ages to access the state's rich and diverse natural, cultural, and historic resources. Whereas North Carolina's natural assets and resources are integral to climate education and protection and integral to recovery and resiliency efforts for future generations. Whereas the state's nature trails vary from less than a mile in length to the Mountains to Sea Trail that stretches more than 1,000 miles from the mountains to the coast, range from rugged footpaths on mountain ridges to bikeways along abandoned railway corridors, from canoe trails down our state's rivers to bridle trails in the rolling Piedmont, from trails through state parks to footpaths and greenways through local neighborhoods. And whereas trails offer quality of life benefits to all North Carolinians as expressions of local community character and pride, as outdoor workshops for science education, as tools for economic revitalization, as accessible alternative transportation, and as sites for social and cultural events. And whereas the North Carolina Trails Program is dedicated to helping residents, organizations, and agencies plan, develop, and manage all types of trails, ranging from greenways and trails for hiking, biking, and horseback riding, to paddle trails and off-road vehicle trails. And whereas North Carolina also boasts many arts, history, and cultural trails that celebrate the state's unique arts, history, and culture. And whereas the North Carolina General Assembly designated 2023 as the Year of the Trail in North Carolina to promote and celebrate the state's extensive network of trails that showcase our state's beauty, vibrancy, and culture. And whereas North Carolina is known as the Great Trails State. Now, therefore, I, Glenn L. York, Mayor of the Town of Zebulon, do hereby proclaim 2023 as the Year of the Trail in North Carolina and commend its observance to all citizens. Adopted this second day of October, 2023.
Thank you. I would also like to recognize that this is also Hispanic Heritage Month, which I've already previously signed a mayoral proclamation to this effect. Next, public comment. Do we have anyone that signed up?
Do you have the list? Ms. Paratori had to step away quickly. We did receive a public comment that was submitted to us. So if you'd like, I can read that into the record.
Okay.
It's from LaTanya McCabe. Quote, "In my thoughts, the Christmas parade that will not be held here in Zebulon, a parade is a public procession, especially one celebrating a special day or event, and including marching bands to walk or march in public in a formal procession, along with marching bands and floats. Also meaning that they will parade through the town. To me, this is a disgrace to our community, who has always celebrated a Christmas parade in downtown Zebulon all these years. The community will be missing out on celebrating a Christmas parade with all their family and friends. Just a few individuals choosing a different route of what they thought was best for them, and not a growing community of over 10,000 people. I do not feel that celebrating a Christmas parade on the lawn of the town hall is the best way. Everything is in a stabilized space and nothing is moving as a parade should. This will leave out some of those community connections and business opportunities for downtown Zebulon. This also leaves out communities that would normally walk to the parade. If you have the parade, then this is an opportunity for newcomers to see what our downtown has to offer them, and maybe what they have to offer our downtown Main Street. This is also a way for our friendly town to support the local businesses on that day. In conclusion, I feel that the parade should not be held at the town hall here and it should be, as always, in our Zebulon downtown location. Let's think about the past, present, and future of this town and what they want in this holiday season. Zebulon, let's do better. Hashtag be intentional, LaTanya McCabe.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment? Hearing none?
Let's come.
It's Lawrence Burton, 909 Loose Strife. I'd like to advertise that the town of Zebulon will be having a flag retirement presented by Cub Scouts Pack 522 on November 11th at 11 a.m. It'll be at Town Hall at the soccer field. I encourage everyone to come out and join and support. This event is not only our way of showing respect and honor to those who served and those who are serving, but it's also a community service event for us to properly retire a United States flag. One other thing I wanted to bring up is, as I saw about the Fire Prevention Week, a lot of people don't realize the different types of fire extinguishers that they should purchase. There's a rating for A, B, and C, and I'll actually have my scouts come up and talk about those ratings right quick for you.
Fights fires that produce ashes like paper and wood.
Fights fires that contains fluids in a battle like gas.
Fights fires that are caused by electrical circuits.
All right, so the part that they didn't mention, I apologize, that's on me. So the A, B, and C is an easy reminder. A's for ashes, B's for bottles, C's for electrical circuits. Make sure when you see fire extinguishers that they have those 3 ratings. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else for public comment? Hearing none, we'll move to consent. Is there a motion?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Consent passes. Thank you. Old business. Planning. 1620 North Arundel Avenue. Ordinance 2024-17.
Mayor and Board of Commissioners, I'm here to talk about the conditional rezoning at 1620 North Arundel Avenue. So the following standards are pertinent to this case, as they are the standards for the conditional rezoning. So I'm going to read them off and just keep them in mind as we go through this conditional rezoning tonight. So number 1, keep in mind whether this proposed conditional rezoning advances the public's health, safety, or welfare, whether and the extent to which the proposed conditional rezoning is appropriate for its proposed location and is consistent with the proposed goals, objectives, and policies of the town's adopted policy guidance. 3, whether an approval of the conditional rezoning is reasonable and within the public's interest. 4, whether the extent to which the concept plan associated with the conditional rezoning is consistent with the ordinance. And any other factors as the Board of Commissioners you may deem to be relevant. So the applicant has requested a conditional rezoning of this site. So it's a conditional rezoning from R2 to HCC, so that's residential commercial to heavy commercial conditional for the use of a veterinary clinic. So the property, some information about it. The applicant for this property is the DVM Services Realty LLC. The current property owner of this property is Julia M. Hicks. The property address is 1620 North Arundel Avenue. The acreage is 1.117 acres. The current zoning is residential suburban R2, and the proposed zoning is heavy commercial HC conditional. So here's an aerial map. So it's located on the corner of Green Pace and Arundel, where the current road improvements are happening, which is just north of the recently opened Popeyes. So the current zoning for this site is R2, as I previously stated, but it is surrounded by heavy commercial across Green Pace and across Arundel, and then is surrounded by residential to the northeast and the southeast boundaries. So one thing to keep in mind is that even though the property to the southeast is zoned residential currently, the future land use shows both this site and that site to be zoned general commercial, which would help to create a commercial corridor along 96. So the timeline of activities: on May 18th, there was a neighborhood meeting held for this project. On June 1st, the first review was submitted. On July 7th, the planning department sent out a comment letter to the applicant. On July 12th, a TRC meeting was held. On August 1st, the second review was submitted. On August 15th, the second comment letter was sent out to applicant with any remaining comments that TRC and planning staff had. And then on September 7th, the joint public hearing packet was submitted, and then on September 18th, the joint public hearing was held. So the concept plan: this is a veterinary office with an outdoor pet exercise area as an accessory to the veterinary office use. So the proposed elevations are as follows. And one thing that I want to note with these is that these proposed elevations really help to do a good job of bridging the architectural design from residential to commercial by putting in design elements of a residential building into the character of this building. So the applicant has proposed the following conditions: a reduction in the distance from the pet exercise area zone from any residentially zoned parcel, and then a modification on a type D buffer. So the separation requirements for a pet exercise zone are currently 200 feet within our UDO, and the applicant is requesting that that be reduced to 75 feet from the residentially zoned areas to the northeast. They are also providing a 6-foot opaque fence, which is already required within the UDO for this use type. As well, I wanted to point out that this site, the pet exercise area, will be screened from the other future commercial zoned areas by being on the Green Pace side of the building, and as well, it is going to be screened from Green Pace using both the streetscape buffer as well as the continuation of the landscape foundation plantings around the side of the fence. So moving on to the buffer, so they're requesting that they would have a modified type D rather than a type D buffer. So this would be a reduction from the 40-foot buffer to a 10-foot in the southeast, and then from a 40-foot to a 20-foot in the northeast property line. And as well, they are proposing to have an opaque fence to help with additional screening that cannot be accomplished by that reduced buffer. And one of the reasons for this is so that they can fit all their required both building and parking within the required street setback of 30 feet along both Green Pace and Arundel. So some road improvements have been proposed and are required by our UDO. So currently, I just wanted to point out that we currently have a town-funded project going on at the corner of Green Pace and Arundel, which is adding a light and an additional left turn lane. And so the applicant will not be responsible for doing any of that work, and we don't foresee that being either of these projects running into each other or inhibiting each other's work. And then as well, the applicant would be responsible, so that's the boxed in orange improvements. So that is what will be constructed once the town finishes their project, our project. And then in the blue is the what the applicant would be responsible for. So with our comprehensive transportation plan, we require Arundel to be a four-lane median divided road, and so the applicant would be responsible for constructing that second lane on their frontage, as well as putting in curb, gutter, sidewalk, and a planting strip, which is consistent with any project that would come in along Arundel where it isn't already 4 lanes divided. So one thing I wanted to bring up that I forgot to bring up in our last session is their trip generation letter, and the applicant has a copy of this letter to pass out to you guys as well, and they will do that after we finish our presentation. So this was submitted by Jeff Weller, a senior transportation engineer, and he's actually here to also answer any questions that you guys have tonight. And shows the number of trips that this project will likely produce. So weekdays, it's likely to produce 110 total trips per day, and then during peak hours in the AM, 18 trips, and weekday peak hours in the PM, 17 trips. So this is consistent with our TIA requirements. So our TIA requirements are stated in the UDO as a TIA shall be required for any new development project utilizing a development plan, site plan, and preliminary plat that can be anticipated to generate at least 50 vehicle trips in either the AM or PM. So that's that peak hour number. So that's the 18 and the 17. Or exceeding 150 average daily trips, as determined by the Institute of Transportation Engineer Standards. So that is the total weekday trips, that 110 number. So they have their traffic engineer here tonight, and I welcome you guys to recognize him to speak and answer any questions that you guys may have. This is the reason that they didn't submit a TIA. You as the board can choose to require them to submit a TIA as part of this conditional rezoning, but it was not required to submit the conditional rezoning or for the conditional rezoning to be approved currently in its current stage. So our utility allocation policy, just a reminder, the utility allocation policy is required for any new development project that is going to have water allocated to it, and the applicant must reach a total of 60 points. So the applicant, being a single-use office, already started with 30 points. They have committed to having an EV charging station with 2 ports for 5 points. They've committed to doing bioretention for their stormwater measures, which gets them another additional 5 points. They have committed to planting a pollinator garden, 225 square foot minimum, which gets them an additional, that's actually the fountain, 2 points. They put their pollinator garden on the next sheet. on the landscaping sheet. So fountain, canopy including permanent fixed seating for 2 points, drinking fountain with pet fountain for 2 points, and then all-weather bulletin for 1 point, and little free library for 1 point. So this is the pollinator garden on the landscaping sheet, and then as well they have provided an additional 9 native shade trees for 9 extra points. And these are in addition to any required landscaping already on site. So parking lot trees, buffer trees, it is in addition. So they've provided 9 extra trees. So again, I'm just going to go back over these standards as you think about this project and whether they met them. So whether the proposed conditional rezoning advances the public health, safety, or welfare, whether and the extent to which the proposed conditional rezoning is appropriate for its proposed location and is consistent with the proposed goals, objectives, and policies of the town's adopted policy guidance, whether an approval of the conditional rezoning is reasonable and within the public's interest, whether and the extent to which the concept plan associated with the conditional rezoning is consistent with the ordinance, and any other factors you, as the Board of Commissioners, may deem to be relevant. So the Planning Board recommended approval 6-0, and they suggested an amendment to further reduce the buffer, which would be consistent with heavy commercial to heavy commercial along the southern boundary. So the reasoning for this reduction, this further reduction, is due to our future land use plan showing the church lot that is along Arundel being commercial. This would be more consistent with that zoning. So when someone comes in to develop that new parcel, to be consistent with that zoning to allow for more visibility as well as more movement between the two sites. And so the type A buffer, I've put a graphic on here to show you what that is and how it may differ from a type D buffer. So there's no canopy trees required in a type A buffer. So the type A buffer has 4 understory trees placed 4 per every 100 linear feet. And then the shrubs, there's 15 per 100 linear feet. So it would be a reduction in buffer, but would be more consistent with a commercial to commercial zoning than what is currently proposed, which is the type D buffer. So staff recommends approval of ordinance 2024-17, finding the proposed request is consistent with the standards listed in section 2.2.2.6 of the UDO. I'm here to answer any questions, and as well, the applicant and the traffic engineer are here to answer any questions that you guys may have.
Thank you. Commissioner Laux.
Yeah, I do have some questions regarding the UDO and the 150 average daily trips. I do have some experience as a management consultant working with veterinarian practices, plus I've done some research, and typically a vet practice will see 40 patients a day. The range is between 30 and 60. 40 is considered the average. Previously at the meeting, they told me they would have between 4 and 5 vets. I just went on the low side and said 4 vets. And if 4 vets see 4 patients a day, that's 160 daily trips. When I add in the 15 employees they said they would have, that's 15 times 2 trips a day coming and going. That's 30 trips. I'm at 190 right now, and I'm assuming no one leaves for lunch. I'm assuming no one ever makes any deliveries. I'm assuming nobody ever stops by to pick up heartworm medicine or drop a pet off. My calculations show we're going to be upwards of 200 daily trips in that vet practice, which I want them to have because that means money and they'll be viable. I've actually worked with this clinic for 20 years with 2 animals. They're a fantastic operation, but I think we may need a TIA, especially coupled with the short Green Pace Road, which I think there may be some backup coming off Proctor. Just some of my numbers and calculations, and I want to hear from the board members as well as the traffic engineer, but those are just some quick numbers I put together, and I think we're going to exceed the 150.
Yeah, so kind of two things on that. That is a great question for the traffic engineer, and as well, the applicant has the numbers of what their current business does on daily trips, average, so that could also be helpful to hear as well, if you would like to recognize them to answer that question.
So the measurements that I did with Michael Clark and Joe Moore in my monthly meeting, we came to the conclusion that there would be about room for 4 vehicles from the intersection to where the exit is. And I suppose it's also the entrance to the veterinary clinic. So that would mean that only 4 vehicles could be loaded to allow another vehicle to come out of the vet clinic and take a left. So just that additional piece of information.
Any other questions from any board members?
I have one more, Mayor.
Okay.
I'd like to have a little bit of an understanding with the reduction in the buffer. Where are those plantings going? Because as part of our utility allocation policy, we give points for additional trees. Are trees being then removed from the buffer? Or explain to me a little bit more about the buffer.
Yeah, so to clarify a little bit, so the trees are in addition to any required landscaping, so that includes the buffer landscaping. So there are 9, let me pull that slide back up just to show you. So there are 9 are identified in those red boxes.
Correct.
So those will not change.
Correct. Are there, it's hard for me, and it's probably difficult for folks at home to read this map and understand where the trees along the reduced buffer area are located and which ones are going to be removed. Could you point that out for us, please?
So the buffer that the planning board was referencing is this buffer along the southeast right here. So currently they were having a reduced type D. So these are understory trees, and they're and then the bushes, and they're very, like, as you can see, they're very close together, because normally a type D is supposed to be a 40-foot buffer, and so it's reducing it to a 10-foot. So that's what the applicant originally proposed. And then the planning board recommended that the buffer be reduced to a type A buffer, which is already a 10-foot width of a buffer. And has understory trees spaced for every 100 linear feet, so they're much more spread out, and then shrubs, which are 15 per every 100 linear square feet. So it's a similar buffer, but it's reducing the density of it. And the intent with that was to be more consistent with a commercial to commercial, as we know that within our future land use plan, we are looking for this site to be commercial, and so most likely it would be. So that just helps with visibility between site, as well as movement between site.
Help me understand why we would need visibility and movement between sites. Does this mean that there's going to be a driveway that opens up into this facility from the other parcel at some point?
Yeah. So actually the applicant in their site plan submittal, we asked them, we thought this was something that they didn't necessarily need to bring in front of the board, but we asked them to put an access around this area to that future site, just to have that inter parcel connection, so that if you're, let's say the parcel next to it is maybe retail or a restaurant, people can go straight from the restaurant to the vet, or from the vet to the restaurant, rather than having to go back onto a rental and go back out and around.
Which would increase the number of trips through that site.
Yes, but they're not trips that are associated with the veterinary use necessarily.
Any other questions from the board? Did the engineer want to come forward?
A little bit taller than the last speakers. Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak here. My name is Jeff Weller, 801 Jones Franklin Road, Raleigh 27606. I have copies of the aforementioned trip generation memo, and I would like to distribute those if I may. And hopefully I can clear up some confusions that there may be, and then also answer any other traffic-related questions that I may.
Thank you.
The table that I think y'all will be interested in will be on the next page if you flip it over. So for trip generations and trip generation studies, the Institute of Transportation Engineers has manuals, or has a manual that includes many, many, many hundreds of land uses, and what they do is they collect data from studies and through statistical analysis generate rates and equations for each of these uses based off of independent variables. For animal hospitals or vet clinics, the independent variable is the square footage, is the density. For this proposed site, as you can see, the density is 5,100 square feet, and you can see the equations for that. Commissioner Locks, I believe that when you were going through and doing math, you were doing it, assigning it per vet. Whereas these studies, it doesn't matter the number of vets, like true veterinarians that are in a site, it's based off the square footage. So it could be one vet in a site, it could be 10 vets in a site, ranging anywhere from, I don't have the numbers between the smallest and largest for the study area, or for each of these studies, but it could be one vet in 1,000 square foot vet clinic, or it could be one vet in a 4,000 square foot. The independent variable itself is the square footage. So if one vet is seeing 40 people a day, that is boiled down into the trip generation, the statistics for the equations for this. So it's based off of, that 5,000 square feet is the average of, all the studies that were included in this. We also have data available for existing locations that would show what those trips are currently on a per day basis as well. I don't have that right in front of me, but if you would like to see that, then I can bring up the applicant for that as well.
Yeah, I'd like to see the actual equation that you're using. I mean, I see that you have like on your trip generation, how are you figuring in the 5,100 square feet into this equation?
So 5,100 square feet
is that
X, so you divide it by 1,000.
Okay, that's the X. Okay.
So the trips are those equations times 5.1. I'll also note that, as you're talking about TIAs, the threshold for the Department of Transportation is 3,000 daily trips. So most towns have a much more restrictive number. Usually what we tend to see in the industry is between 100 and 150 peak hour trips as the minimum, whereas Zebulon is even more restricted at 50. I think you'll see though that with an expected 18 in the morning and 17 in the afternoon, this land use is far below what would require a TIA. Yes, sir?
Yeah, I understand that in our work, we all have manuals that we go to get like statistics.
Sure.
But by the same token, I'm looking at the number of employees which generate the trips. I don't really know if they're going to have grooming or other things within this 5,100 square feet. but my background deals more with cash flow and the velocity or the turnover so a business can succeed. And, you know, based upon what they said in their last meeting with the number of employees, the number of vets, and I actually talked to a local vet who said on an extremely busy day, they've seen as many as 100 animals in a work day. Now, that work day exceeds 8 hours, and we also have to remember sometimes we take 2 pets per visit. All right, that's 1 visit, it may be 2 animals, so you have to kind of look at these numbers. But, you know, in crunching my numbers, not looking at your manual, I'm seeing close to 200, but that is just the way I'm looking at my numbers.
Do we need to discuss the current operations? Do you want to share those numbers? Step away, and I think there was one other traffic question that we can address after.
Hi, I'm Steve Thomas. I'm the president of Vets Pets. We're a group of animal hospitals based out of Wilson. We own and operate about 30 in North Carolina, one of which, fortunately, here in Zebulon. Currently at 1403 North Arundel, at the corner of Pierce's and North Arundel. We've been operating there for about 15 years. We currently employ 3 veterinarians. They don't work every day. Some work 3 days a week, some work 4 days a week. We hope to have 5 or 6, but they will not all work the same days. We took a look at some of our recent data for the last 6 months. We've averaged about 29 visits per day with about 7 staff members. So roughly about 35 average visits a day. We won't do boarding, we won't do grooming, we're just gonna be veterinary medicine. Based on our other locations, on a sales per square foot, exam room is usually our largest restriction as far as capacity. We're gonna have enough exam rooms maybe to hit 5 or 6 veterinarians in similar facilities. That might be triple where we are today. So at best, I would love to see 110 a day, and I hope we get to. As far as I noticed in one of the goals is for health, safety, and welfare. I don't know if this is relevant or not, but our current location is challenged from a traffic flow perspective. We've been told by the planning department that the intent for that location is not to continue to function like it does today, so we've been trying to find a new home now for about 3 years. We've looked at multiple sites. We're very excited about this one, and we hope we get the chance to operate there. Any other questions I could answer about our current operations or plans?
Currently going to be, I assume, an 8 to 5 or 8 to 6 type operation?
Yes, sir. Our hours are 8 until 5:30, when we don't see patients from 12 to 2. We're appointment driven, so flow is very consistent throughout the day. I'd say 80% of our visits are by appointment. Average appointment time is 30 minutes per veterinarian.
Any other questions from the board? Comments? Thank you.
Was there one other traffic question about the distance between the driveway and the intersection?
No, that wasn't a question, that was a statement.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments from the board? Commissioner Laux?
Well, this is a business that's going to have the trips spread out throughout the day because of the appointment nature of it. And there probably won't be a big problem early in the morning because right now it's around 6, 7 o'clock a.m. that we have a problem at that intersection. The 5:30, 6 o'clock may create a little bit of a backup, especially on that green pace short stop. That's why I'm leaning towards a TIA.
Commissioner Harrison?
I agree with Commissioner Laux. I think just to be on the safe side, it would just be a good idea for us to get a TIA done for this property.
Commissioner Clark?
I agree with our planning department on the trip generation.
Commissioner Miles?
I can agree with the Commissioner Laus as well. TIA should be done in that intersection, being that we know that it is one of the busiest intersections that we have currently in the town.
Commissioner Baxter?
I think that we already have enough of a desire amongst the board for an additional traffic impact analysis. My concern is with the reduction in the buffer on the one side. I'm not sure that we need to reduce it that much, considering that it was already taken from a 40-foot down to a 10-foot buffer. I think that if it does develop in the future, then it can be addressed as far as removal of any of that buffer goes.
Any other questions, comments?
For me as well. One quick question. If we don't go with the reduction of the buffer, what would take place there? Okay.
If you don't go with the reduction of the buffer?
That is correct. From 40 to 10.
Okay, so we're talking here. Sorry, let me pull up that buffer slide. So you're talking about keeping the type D buffer, but requiring it to be the full 40 feet.
That is correct.
So that would, so part of the reason the applicant is asking for the reduction in the buffer is to allow there to be space for the necessary parking. And so if we saw that 40-foot buffer, it would have to, I don't know exactly on here, but this is a 10-foot, so quadruple this. So it would take out a good amount of the parking as well as that travel lane along.
Maybe I'm not understanding then, Kate, because I was assuming that what we were talking about right here was the 10-foot buffer.
Yeah,
correct?
so yes.
And that the planning board somehow wants it to be reduced from the type D, which is what we're seeing up here, to a type A.
Correct. Yes, that is correct. So the applicant has asked for along the northeast boundary for the southeast boundary, a reduction from the 40-foot, which is what is required within our UDO for a type D buffer, to a 10-foot with similar plantings.
Which is what the plan
Which is
shows.
what the plan shows, exactly.
Okay.
And then as well, to the northeast, they're reducing it to a 20-foot, so a little more space, but not quite as much. The planning board came back and recommended, sorry, the slides are so far apart, recommended that there be a type A, which is a different type of buffer and is currently within our UDO regulations a 10-foot buffer, which requires the 4 understory trees per 100 linear feet and then 15 per 100 linear feet shrubs spaced out.
So what was the rationale before the planning board even recommending the reduction from the start?
Yeah, again, so the planning board was recommending this due to the nature that it is already 10 feet, and as well that the future land use shows that zoning to be a commercial zoning, and the type A buffer is the zoning that the type A buffer is the buffer that is required for a heavy commercial to a heavy commercial zoning. So in our UDO, we have a little table that shows like one zoning to another zoning, what buffer is required in between. So think about, you don't necessarily want an industrial zone to have a type A buffer between a residential, right? So this is to help create both a buffer in sound, noise, pollution, as well as a buffer in visibility. So within a commercial to commercial, because they are similar uses, we only require a type A buffer. And so type A buffer is significantly reduced, as you can see, only requiring the 4 understory trees per 100 linear feet and then the 15 per 100 linear feet. So that was kind of the rationale, is because the future land use shows this site to the southeast to be commercial, to already have the proposed buffer for commercial to commercial on this site. And then as well, if any commercial came in on that site as well, they would also be required to have this type A buffer. Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Laux?
Yeah, 3 questions related to vehicles. I was trying to count the dash marks to see how many parking spots were on this site. Mm-hmm. Second part of that question is, how do you determine how many parking spots that are required? Is that based upon the square foot of the building? And then number 3, and this is becoming a topic everywhere, when businesses put in EV stations, it's assumed those are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to anybody. So I'm assuming these EV stations will be open all the time?
That would be a question for the applicant. I know that I think they spoke with a yes. They're saying yes, that the EV stations would be available 24/7. And then to answer your question about parking, so I spoke a little bit earlier. So the required parking for the site is based off of the number of vets, I believe. So the number of spaces per vet. And I can't remember what that is. Yeah, Mike's going to look it up. But the way that we do parking is we require parking for some uses based off, so it's based off of use, and then it's based off of either the square footage of the building or the employees. That's often kind of the two thresholds. So they actually wouldn't need that parking necessarily according to our standards, but it also might be necessary for their practice to have more parking if needed. But Mike is looking up that exact threshold, but I believe it might be 1 per vet, but I will have Mike confirm. Yes.
Then what would you do if they, and I hope they do, have 8 vets? How would you keep up with that? Because we would end up with not having enough parking spots.
So it's based off of like the intended number of vets, and I know that it's not necessarily the best threshold to use, but it is what's in our UDO. So it's what we're going off of is the number of vets that they're saying that they will have. And I think it actually might be 4 spaces per vet. Just see if we can find it real quick. But yeah, so they wouldn't need to add spaces if they ended up hiring more vets. But most places, when they come in, especially for office uses, they know their capacity for the number of vets or the number of how large the practice can get. And so it's based off of the number of projected employees on site.
Do we know how many parking spots are on that drawing? I tried to kind of count, but it's...
Let me see. Okay, so there's 4 spaces per doctor, and then there's 32 spaces on the site.
Okay,
and so that should be on the larger site plan. It should be in the little box on the site plan. Yeah, I just didn't have that number off the top of my head. Sorry about that. But yeah, so 32, and so 4 spots per vet. And so that's to support both the vet themselves and then as well the patients who might be coming.
Any further questions, comments?
Reference to speaking to residents that are currently there at that location. One of the biggest concerns was the reduction from 40 to 10. I would like my fellow commissioners to take that into consideration as well. I did speak with the residents that are currently there. That was a big issue that they had.
From the 40 to the 20
on
the top.
On the backside.
Yeah.
Correct.
I'm fine with reducing the buffer, but I don't think that it should go from a type D that's already been reduced to 10 feet down to a type A. I mean, there's being able to be visible, and then there's, providing almost a 0 buffer whatsoever. I mean, type A is very, very small.
Any other questions, comments from the board, from staff, from the applicant?
Elizabeth Wilcox with Site Collaborative, and I just am curious as to...
I'm sorry, could you please repeat who you are?
Elizabeth Wilcox with Site Collaborative. We're the landscape architect planners. Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Sorry, okay. Elizabeth Wilcox with Site Collaborative. We're the landscape architect and planners. And I guess I'm curious, in terms of the traffic impact analysis, when that would be required. I'm not quite sure. We've already worked well with staff and been through the process, and I don't think we have a reluctance to do it. We're just not sure about the timing now that we've already gone through and done all this work.
I'd also like to add something about the TIA. So assuming that all trips are going through the main intersection of Arundel and Green Pace, with the trip generation, as you have seen in the trip generation memo, you're going to be looking at one trip every roughly 3 minutes of that signal. It's not going to be any significant difference between the build and the no build to do a TIA for this site.
I believe our UDO says if the average trips per day exceed 150, you have to do a TIA.
Correct.
And just crunching my numbers, even though I'm not looking at a manual, traffic manual, I'm seeing more than 150.
UDO specifies that it's the trips generated by the IT trip generation manual.
I believe it reads average daily trips, does it not?
It's as determined by the Institute of Transportation Engineer Standards, which I believe is the manual. Is that correct?
That is the trip generation manual, yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Oaks, if I may. As you recall, approximately 6 months ago, the town staff brought forth a text amendment to substantially reduce the thresholds in which the transportation impact assessment would have to be done. We are far more strict than a lot of the other communities, partly because of the growth rate. However, we were very specific. So from a staff perspective, we could not require a TIA based on what are the language in our UDO. The IT manual is not just looking at one vet, but it's looking at hundreds of different examples spread all across the country based on the numbers of trips coming and going from a particular location. Those numbers are congregated based on averages and then put in these type of calculations for professional engineers like the applicants to do that type of analysis.
If I can kind of put you on the spot here and ask you, you're a planning director, do you not see a potential traffic issue on that short stop of Green Pace between Proctor and Arundel?
Not that is being created by the applicant. If it was a more intensive use where a transportation impact assessment would have to be done, then yes, I would have much greater concern. But for a use that has this low of average daily trips, and based on the numbers of existing clients that have been provided by the applicant, I do not have a concern that this use is going to result in a more negative impact to that particular intersection.
Yeah, my common sense is telling me that that manual assumes there are nice straight roadways going past a business and maybe does not take into consideration the business is on a corner and one of those roads is very short. I don't think the manual takes that into consideration.
We could come up with 1,000 different variables that the manual doesn't take into consideration.
Well, I think for us, one of the biggest things it doesn't take in consideration that we're currently the second fastest growing municipality in North Carolina. We're growing at a rate of 7 people per day. To err on the side of caution, the TIA will not hurt us.
And just to remind the board procedurally, if this is something that the majority, that there is consensus, staff would recommend that the request be tabled to allow for consideration by the applicant.
How long, Mike, I'm sorry, about how long does it take to get a TIA report back?
I'm going to defer to the transportation engineer for that question.
With ordering counts, current workload, I would suspect that TI would take draft for roughly 4 to 6 weeks.
Can't speak to the technicalities. I visit this site frequently, excited to try to occupy it. I know there is not a light there currently, and I would understand if it was a mandatory left out of our parking lot on a green pace, but it's not. Every time I go around Proctor and come back down on the other direction. So as a daily traffic driver, if I see something's back up, I'm going to take an alternative route that is very accessible. So I guess I would ask why that wouldn't be taken into consideration.
Any other questions, comments?
I do have one further comment. So the purpose of a TIA is to determine recommended improvements that would mitigate any additional delay by a site. So if you're looking at the table in front of you, where in the PM you have 10 trips exiting in a peak hour, that's one car leaving every 6 minutes. There are not going to be any mitigation requirements that are going to be recommended. The volume for this site is so low that even with growth in the area, you're not going to see a substantial difference in traffic.
Any other questions, comments? Hearing no other comments or questions, is there a motion from the board?
I hereby make a motion to approve ordinance 2024-17 for the conditional rezoning of 1620 North Arundel, finding that the request is consistent with section 2.2.26 of the UDO and the land use and development section of the comprehensive land use plan.
We have a motion. Is there a second? There is no second. Motion fails. Is there another motion?
Well, how about some discussion? I guess the recommendation from the planning director was this be tabled if we want a TIA done.
We would need that in a motion.
Right, and then do we want any further discussion about the buffer? I understand this will be buffered against another commercial at some point in time. I don't like dropping 40 to 10 feet, but when it's commercial to commercial, I can kind of see where 10 feet may be acceptable.
I don't disagree with that. It's just the actual buffer designation, the number of plantings.
Speak into the mic, please.
You don't hear that often, do you? Yeah, it's just the number of plantings.
So if we do make a motion to table this, what would you want from the applicant as far as the buffer? A revised buffer plan, or?
Like a revised buffer plan. Being that I know that I spoke to the resident that's currently there, I understand in the future we're looking for commercial, but right now we're not there. So I think we must take in consideration the current citizens that are there. And like I was just speaking, they had really good concerns about that.
If I may speak for 1 second, one thing I just want to clarify is that the residence is only to, sorry, I should have made this a smaller PowerPoint. So the residents are only to the north. So the buffer that the planning board was asking for the reduction in the planting types is the one to the southeast, which only buffers currently the church.
Take it on the right.
Yes, and so the church is zoned residential, but it is a religious institutional use. And then the buffer to the north, they are requesting a 20-foot. So I just wanted to clarify that, just to make that clear. So the buffer to the north that is buffering the residential properties is, the applicant has asked for that to be reduced to a 20-foot buffer.
But it's still a type D.
But it's still a type D. Both of these currently are still a type D. So it still has all the same plantings that would be required at that 40-foot length. It's just closer together. And then the buffer along the southeast is only buffering the church, which is a residentially zoned parcel, but is not a residential use currently. I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you.
Any further discussion?
I would just like, if you guys are going to put forth a motion to table, to ask for some reconsideration of the buffer type and see what they come back with.
Are you asking for a reduction in the buffer?
A reconsideration.
A reconsideration of the buffer.
Of the buffer type from type A, from what the planning board recommended. What is actually currently on there is a type D. So I would be fine reducing the type of buffer, but I'm hesitant to reduce it down to a type A. Still maintaining the 10-foot. Yeah. Could just approve it the way it was written and not take into consideration the planning board, but I do like to take into consideration what the planning board has to say.
Commissioner Hawks?
In the sake of fairness, I do have another question for the traffic engineer, in that if we were to require a full-blown TIA, how might the numbers come back differently, or what else would you look at as opposed to the manual?
So the trip generation is the trip generation. That gets added on to what we call background growth. So we take counts. If there's a predetermined UDO growth rate, we'll use that. If not, we will determine one that will then be approved by staff, grown out to the proposed year of development or proposed year of opening. And then the numbers that you just saw from the trip generation get added on top of that, with distributions add up to 100% depending on which direction they come from. So, for instance, if there is currently, let's do some simple math, if there's currently 100 vehicles in a peak hour on the Green Pace approach from the north, and let's say it's a 5% growth rate and they're going to open next year, you're now at 105 cars in the peak hour on that approach. That is the future no build. So that is the baseline. We then add our 6 cars in the peak hour, or 10 cars if you want to. So the difference between 115 cars and 105 cars on that approach is not going to make a difference. Having done this for nearly 20 years, I can tell you that that is not going to show you any sort of reduction in operations. It's not going to increase delay by more than 1/10 of a second average. So with the short duration of between now and when it would open, with the land use and with the trips that are generated from that IT trip gen manual, there's not going to be a significant difference between the future no build and the future build.
As much as I would like to see a TIA report, I don't want to mix common sense in here with what the UDO says and the manual where we pull the numbers from. I am concerned about the traffic, but I'm not a traffic engineer.
Any other questions from the board, from staff, from the applicant? Are we ready for a motion?
So let's try it again. I hereby move to approve ordinance 2024-17 for the conditional rezoning of 1620 North Arundel, finding that the request is consistent with section 2.2.6 of the UDO and the land use development section of the comprehensive land use plan, with the exception of the buffer being taken into consideration. I don't really know how you want that motion to go.
Well, if we approve it, it's going to be approved.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
So if you approve the motion, if you approve the ordinance as is, it doesn't have the planning board's recommendation within it. Oh, sorry, it does. You can
why would we do that?
just state
Why would
that
they
you
put
want
it
to
in there?
take out the planning board's motion.
That's not.
So what the applicant had originally proposed was that type D, and then the planning board, we updated the motion to include the planning board's recommendation, but if you would like to take that out, you can make a statement to take that out.
With removing the planning board's recommendation for the buffer.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Discussion.
I'd like to know what changed, Commissioner Harrison and Commissioner Laus, what's changed based off the information that we received from their engineer, as far as the tabling and getting the TIA done? Is that what changed?
For me, nothing changed, but hearing the logic and reason and understanding our current our policy and what it says, I want to make sure that we are not opening up a can of what ifs, what haves, and it's not based on facts and the data that has been presented to us. And if the information that we would get if we were to table this, it would have to be tabled until maybe the December board meeting for 4 to 6, to allow 4 to 6 weeks. And if we are going to table something to allow 4 to 6 weeks for something to come back, and it's going to come back and it's going to say the same thing, which the gentleman said, I don't think that it's in the best, it's just in the best, way of the town to make that decision as the representatives in the governing board. I think that we have to make the best decision based on the town and our citizens, and based on the information and the facts. I want to make sure that we are in fact making the best decision that we can based off of the information that we received. So that's what's changed for me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Laus?
And this business should be a constant flow of traffic as opposed to the industrial plant that closes at 5 and everybody rushes out at one time. There should be pretty smooth flow traffic coming and going.
No concerns with the current volume there on Green Pace at all?
I'm not going to say I don't have any concerns, because that would be saying that I don't have any concerns about traffic in general in Zebulon.
Right.
I think we all have lots of concerns about the traffic patterns in our town, specifically for that intersection and for that area, as I travel it every single day.
Right.
But I also want to be mindful and operate in a very good sense of caution when we have people that are giving us the best information, the best data that they can give us right now with what they have according to what we have in our policy.
And along with that, Arundel is being widened, and we are going to have a traffic light at that intersection, which should help immensely. Only concern is that short Green Pace stub backing up. It already backs up.
Backs up to Raleigh Hill. It backs up all the way down Proctor. It backs up going back down to Green Pace past the bridge. Okay.
It also is backed up right now because of the current construction that's going on. I had to take a back road just to get here tonight because it was backed up. So I want to make sure that we are, as we're looking at these traffic patterns and we're looking at this new site, we are also taking into consideration that there is current construction going on those roads right now. So in all fairness, I want to make sure we're looking at all those things.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
And I appreciate your honesty and your feedback with what you gave us, with what we have, with what we're looking at. Understand that our concern is we already have a huge traffic issue in Eastern Wake County, not just in Zebulon. And so we want to ensure that any businesses that are moving, any rezoning that is coming to our town is going to be in the best interest of the town and the citizens, and more specifically the residents in that area. So we do appreciate your time. I just want to make sure you know that. So thank you.
Any other discussion from the board? We have a motion and a second. We're ready to vote. Commissioner Baxter? In favor. Commissioner Miles?
Not in favor.
Commissioner Clark? Favor. Commissioner Harrison?
Favor.
Commissioner Laux?
In favor.
Motion passes. At this point, we will take a 10-minute recess. Thank you.
He wants to get a photo with you.
Back.
I'll do it.
Would you like some M&Ms?
Yeah. Well,
We're just getting our blood sugar up over
here we go, a little chocolate buzz here.
Get something.
Bring the meeting back to order. Strategic Plan Grant Policy, Resolution 2024-06. Manager
Mayor,
Moore.
and thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Commissioners. I don't have any slides, so I'm going to provide a little bit more background. Local governments may fund a nonprofit for specific programs or services as an alternative to directly providing those programs or services themselves. Guiding principles to the award of grants to nonprofit organizations include: 1, support is only for functions the local government has authority to provide; 2, certain accountability requirements may be required as a condition of those funds; and 3, faith-based organizations may not use funds for a religious purpose. A nonprofit funding policy was adopted by the town in November of 2007 and later revised in January of 2020 to incentivize and leverage the efforts of local nonprofit organizations to advance upon the goals of the Zebulon 2030 strategic plan. The General Assembly has subsequently adopted statutes specifying how municipalities award grants to nonprofits, and that has led to a change in your strategic plan grant policy. The board reviewed a draft revision of this strategic plan grant policy at their work session on August 17, 2023, and offered no changes. Before the board tonight is that unmodified strategic plan grant policy that they saw at their work session back in August. The discussion before the board is whether to consider adopting the revised strategic plan grant policy. I'm available to take any questions you may have.
Questions from the board? Comments?
Question, Mayor.
Commissioner Baxter.
So on page 163, I'll give you a second to get there.
Okay.
Under funding eligibility, which is section 3.3, number 4, it says that grants are for operating costs, but then it also says that the town will not fund purchase, maintenance, or repair of capital assets in excess of $5,000. Could you just explain that a little bit more, since we're saying that they're just for operating costs and then we're mentioning capital assets?
Yeah, this is a holdover from the policy that was drafted in 2007, so I'm taking some liberties at what was intended. But what I would suspect that it means is that that the grant could be applied for operating costs, but they wouldn't. The intention, it reads to me, is that they would not want this to go to major purchases to repair capital assets. So I think in reading this, an appropriate use is if the nonprofit wanted to fund daily routine operating costs, that these would be eligible uses of the expenses. If they wanted to do something like repair their air conditioning or repair a roof or get a major maintenance or fix to a vehicle they had, this would not be an applicable use of funds. But that's me reading what I think was what was crafted in 2007, so that may not have been the intent, but that's how I read it.
Could we clean up that verbiage to just say something like grants are for operating costs only? I mean, would that would basically be the same as what you just indicated, correct?
I think a nonprofit could make the statement that repair of air conditioning or roof or major repair of a vehicle could be an operating cost. So this is really the purview of the board. If they want to just keep it simple and say grants are for operating costs and run the risk that they might apply those to those capital expenses, then you can certainly modify that language in the motion to adopt. But if you do have concerns about it going towards capital assets, then I would leave it in as it's written.
So as it's written, it would be if you're repairing the air conditioning and the air conditioning repair is $4,000, you can apply your $1,000 because you're considering it an operating cost. But if you're repairing the air conditioning and it's $5,001, then that is not the purpose of the funding. Am I understanding that correctly?
Reading it technically, yes, that would be the application. Again, I'm trying to interpret what the intent was in 2007, and I think the spirit of this is that the town did not want funds going towards any capital assets, but technically the way it reads, if they have a capital asset under $5,000, $4,999, technically they could do that.
What do you guys think? Does it need to be cleaned up, or are we fine keeping it with they're able to make a capital asset purchase or repair as long as it's under $5,000, and then do we ask them to come back and explain that? Like, that's the only thing really in this policy that kind of stuck with me.
But it also, we do not allow them over $1,000.
No, but if the overall repair is over $5,000, then you can't spend the $1,000 on it. Is that how it's written? Because that's how I read it.
That's the way that I read it.
And so I'm just saying maybe it needs to be cleaned up so that when we read it, we know what it says.
I think it needs to be cleaned up, because if we're sitting here as the people that are approving the policy questioning it, what are the citizens left to do? So I think we need to figure out how to clean it up.
Well, I just want to make sure that it's clear when a nonprofit comes before us, that they know what it can and can't be used for.
Correct.
I mean, yeah, clear verbiage would be great. But then at the same, okay.
They're still going to be on a case-by-case basis.
But we don't, in the past, we haven't asked them beforehand to explain what they were going to be using the award for. And then they've come back and they've kind of given us a little bit of an update after, at the end of the year, saying, this is what we did with this money.
Yeah.
And if it, so do we say, yeah, you can buy yourself a refrigerator as long as that refrigerator is under $5,000, you can apply the grant money towards it? Or do we say, we're not going to do that, it has to be towards operating costs? I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah.
For me, I just would like to see it a little bit clearer.
I mean, if the nonprofit is doing something to promote the town, other than operating cost, I guess it just depends on how you look at it.
Yeah, I think it's just really going to be on a case-by-case basis, because if you say you have a project that's in there $6,000 and they're a nonprofit that's giving food out for the community, and they need to repair their refrigerator and it's more than $5,000 and they have to put, and they're $990 short, I wouldn't want them to not be able to get their refrigerator fixed because they can't get the $1,000 that we have allocated to them to repair that, if they're providing a service to our community. So I think it's.
So then do we just take that portion of it out, saying that because in your example, it was a $6,000 repair.
Right,
I don't know. I mean, like, I'm just putting it out there for discussion.
I think it's fine. I don't think it needs to be changed, but.
All right.
I do have a question.
You comfortable with that?
Commissioner Harrison?
I do have another question. I'm not sure if we were done with talking about that.
So we're comfortable with that. The verbiage that's currently there, we're leaving it as is?
I think it's a little bit sloppy, but if you guys are fine with it.
No, let's figure out what we need to do to make you feel comfortable. If we can, let's at least have the discussion so we can figure that out. Because this is a policy that, I mean, later on, we're going so fast, not going to be able to come back and kind of clean it up later on. Let's clean it up now as we're going.
I mean, I personally don't see it to be problematic if someone is repairing something that they use in their daily operations as operating costs. should they be able to go out and buy a new whatever with it? Well, maybe, but if that's how we're gonna put it, then let's, you know, if we're okay with that, let's make sure that it says that we're okay with that, and it doesn't say that we're not doing things in excess of $5,000 or mentioning capital assets.
You know, we may also be able to identify other sources of funds from even other groups. If we need to help something, we don't have to automatically use town taxpayer money to make something happen or get something fixed.
No, of course not, of course not. I mean, but just for the sake of this policy, that was the one thing that I thought maybe could be cleaned up.
How do we validate that the money we gave them got spent on exactly what they said they were going to do?
I mean, in the past, they've come back before us and they've said, thank you very much. This is what, you know, these are programs that we spent money on. I mean, I would assume that this is, the intent is to have it continue on as we operated before.
Yeah, it's written into the policy that the nonprofit will come back to you and report how the funds were spent, and that can be a condition as to whether they get approved for funding in the future if they do not fulfill that requirement.
I guess, Commissioner Clark, you were around when it was written. Can you recall something to that effect, that initial kind of insight? That you were kind of like around when it was written? Have they always come back when you guys were, I haven't used this since written on board.
We didn't start to come back but a few years ago.
Okay.
The reporting back was introduced in the 2020 revision.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. If that discussion is over, I have another question.
Sure, that's fine.
Okay. In the event, Joe, that just if it so happens, which I hope that it doesn't, where we don't have enough nonprofits that come and take up the entire $5,000, is there something that we can do? Say we come to like the end of or close to the end of our fiscal year and there's still some money in that grant in that line. Do we have a way to, or we're just going to put it in general, roll it over to general funds, or will we be able to kind of make a call to say, nonprofits, you haven't utilized your money, and I may have overlooked it.
No,
but
yeah,
just,
in here it says that you have to apply by a certain date, so we'll know before the end of the fiscal year, like, and we've never had people.
Right, I know
like,
it says that in here that they have a certain date, but if we don't get enough applicants to utilize
Yeah,
that
it
money,
goes back into general fund,
does it
right?
just go back, or is there just a conversation piece? Like if during that time frame, there's not enough applications to spend that $5,000, will we extend a deadline, or not extend a deadline, but will we come back and say, hey, nonprofits, we still have some money? And I guess that's a question for the board, maybe not necessarily one that Joe can answer, or is that just not what we would do because of this?
We have never had any money left.
Right.
Never. Never had
You know,
any
I
money.
didn't think
Now,
so,
I'm
but
speaking with 20 years, so.
that shouldn't be,
we've
okay,
never
all right.
had Money
In-
left over.
In fact, we, at some point, may need to look at increasing
Increasing
this,
it,
because
yeah.
really $5,000 is
Five
not a lot of money with all these nonprofits that we have that's doing great work. And we're trying to split this a little bit up.
Be a piece of the pie.
Yeah.
That's my
it's-
So is this the time frame that we potentially could take a look at that? Or we?
Not for this fiscal year, maybe next fiscal.
That might be a budget.
The budget that you adopted has the $5,000 amount in it. So if you wanted to revise the policy to consider a higher amount, you would also have to revisit your budget.
All right, thank you. I have one quick question. Number one, on the same page, Town Manager, a nonprofit agency must have operated for 2 years by December 31st of the year preceding the application deadline. I think currently now, for me, it seems as if we had set it up a little bit that a nonprofit coming on board will more so need that funding than something that's been established for 2 years. So I was trying to figure out if there's somewhere we kind of have a little leeway in that. I'll give you an example currently where we helped out the current walk that we're about to have. They wouldn't have qualified for that funding at all or anything that we got currently. So trying to leave a little bit of leeway as we're growing, more nonprofits are coming forward. Is there any wiggle room in that? Or
No, see, I feel like you need to show that you've got some teeth into what we're doing here in Zebulon. Like, I don't want folks to consider this to be seed money for their nonprofit to get up and off the ground. We did do it before, and probably I think it was a good decision to do it. However, if we were following our policy, and we probably shouldn't have. But, you know, like, I don't want folks coming before us and saying, hey, I just started a nonprofit 5 minutes ago and I'd like $1,000 so I can try and do this. I'd rather say we've been doing this. I can show you that we are in the community doing good work, and, you know, we'd like to be able to continue the program that we're already doing. That's just me.
I will say, Commissioner Miles, I had that same question as well, being a nonprofit. I have a nonprofit as well. In those first few years, it is really imperative to get that stability. And I think that we have a lot of different areas that we can help nonprofits with some of the things that we've done in the past with, like, waiving fees and different things like that. But I do think when it's time to, like, give out money and grants, that it would be just a better situation for the 2-year. I think the 2-year time frame is good when it comes to allocating funds directly to the nonprofit.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Harris. We need a track record, need a little background on them, what they're doing, what they're trying to do.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Any further discussion? Is there a motion?
I make a motion to approve Resolution 2024-06.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion?
I wish that we would clean up that one line that says what the grants are actually for.
So how do you say what do you see?
I don't know. Like,
what do you want to say?
we should decide right now. Are the grants going to be for operating costs? Are they going to be for capital? Are they going to be for both? And it's fine if they're for both, but I think that it should say that it's for both, because I think the verbiage here is difficult to understand.
Commissioner Laux.
I think we should let the applicant make that point to us that is not a capital purchase, that this, in fact, is an operating expense.
Okay.
That way we have the exclusion in here that we don't fund capital, but they can make the case it is, in fact, operating.
Any further discussion? Are we ready for a vote? Commissioner Baxter?
Approve.
Commissioner Miles?
Favor.
Commissioner Clark?
Favor.
Commissioner Harrison?
Favor.
Commissioner Laux?
Favor.
Motion passes. Thank you. American Rescue Plan Required Policies Resolution 2024-07. Ms. Fitz?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good evening. Yeah, there's two items regarding the American Rescue Plan Act funds that we received about a year and a half ago now. The first one being this resolution, 5 policy attached to it. It's resolution 2024-07. I don't have really any other slides. other than you have all the policies in your packet. This is a requirement going along with the American Rescue Plan funds that these policies and procedures are adopted and implemented by all governments that receive the funding. Any questions on them? I'll be glad to take them, but they're just boilerplate policies that were basically given to everybody by the Treasury to adopt and enact and follow. Any questions on those?
Questions, comments from the board? Commissioner Laux?
I'm in favor of adopting it.
Any, Commissioner Harrison?
No.
Commissioner Clark?
No.
Commissioner Miles?
None at this time, sir.
Commissioner Baxter?
Nope.
Is there a motion?
I move we adopt ordinance 2024-14 as well as ordinance 2024-15, American Rescue Funds.
I think we're at 2024-07.
That's 07.
Just 15 in front of me, sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
That's the next item. But,
That's the next one.
Yeah,
I revise that motion to adopt American Rescue Required Policies Resolution 2024-07.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. Commissioner Baxter?
Approve.
Commissioner Miles? Favor. Commissioner Clark? Commissioner Harrison?
Favor.
Commissioner Laux?
Favor.
Motion passes.
Thank you. On to those two ordinances, 2024-14 and 2024-15. What this is, you recall, back in September of 21, we adopted the project ordinance to receive these American Rescue Plan funds. Then at the mini retreat last October, the board directed staff to use those funds towards the West Horton Street drainage project. The design contract was awarded for this in June of 23, the June 15th meeting. What we're here tonight to do is basically just an accounting transaction. Those two ordinances, based on strong encouragement from the league, Triangle J, School of Government, with the amount we received, there's a $10 million basically free allowance to use the revenue replacement method for these funds. By doing that, it releases a lot of restrictions and reporting requirements that go along with it if it's used other than revenue replacement. So what we're recommending to do is to take these funds and basically reimburse ourselves, and you'll see in the staff report, reimbursing ourselves from what covers police and fire department salaries and benefits from March of 21 through June of 22. And then essentially use these funds that are reimbursing ourselves with this transaction, and then put them towards the West Horton Street drainage project still. But it relieves some of the time constraints that will go along with using ARPA money for that project specifically.
Any questions from the board? Comments? Hearing none, are we ready for a motion?
Yeah, I move that we approve ordinance 2024-14 and ordinance 2024-15.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Laux. Discussion. Hearing none. Commissioner Laux?
In favor?
Commissioner Harrison?
Favor.
Commissioner Clark? Commissioner Miles? Favor. Commissioner Baxter?
Approve.
Motion passes. Thank you. Board comments?
Commissioner Clark?
Commissioner who?
What'd you say?
I'm just glad to see the fall weather getting in Zebulon, so, and I think we have the block coming up too, so it should be
October
nice for that.
13th.
So, that's all.
Commissioner Miles?
Yes, sir. 1 second, please. Not much to say, but wanted to give a big thank you to the Boy Scouts for leading the Pledge of Allegiance tonight. And also want to pay recognition to our Public Works Department and their presentation last Tuesday at our Government 101 class. It was incredibly informative, and they even let us play on the equipment. Commissioner Louts, you should be proud. Your wife was a natural up there. Looking forward to tomorrow's Government 101 with the brave folks at Fire Department. Unity through community.
Commissioner Baxter?
Sure. First, I would like to say I was very, very honored and delighted to have been a part of the Building Homes for Heroes event for Hans and Christina Munn. Christina is a member of Steel Magnolias, and her husband has more awards and accolades than probably anyone that I've ever met. He's written books and accomplished so much, and I'm so happy that Building Homes for Heroes was able to provide them with a brand new home. I'm very, very grateful that once again, Public Works pulled off a successful recycling day with only one exploded paint can reported. We have the Faith in Blue event coming up this Friday at 5:30. So my last comment is uncomfortable to talk about, but I'm going to. In April of 2019, I was sitting on the planning board, and a special use permit came before us for a company called GRE, and we now know it as Bravin. During that special use permit, we heard testimony that the facility was going to operate and put off no emissions and create no waste. I was contacted last week by a reporter. Her name is Skylar Mitchell, and she reports for The Intercept. She has done a bunch of research into the Bravin facility and forwarded me a significant amount of material from the EPA. I called and spent several hours on the phone with the EPA trying to understand what a significant non-complier designation meant. Bravin has received, out of 5 of the last 12 quarters, they have been a significant non-complier with 1 formal enforcement. What Bravin does is called pyrolysis, and it's a little bit like alchemy. They say that you can turn plastic into fuel, and they came before us and said that it would be safe for our community. Well, it's not. It's greenwashing and it's environmental injustice. And our community, I fully believe, was targeted because of our low median income. We were told that Bravin doesn't handle hazardous material, yet in 2021 alone, the Zebulon facility shipped 9.6 tons of hazardous ignitable waste and benzene. They claimed that it would only emit carbon dioxide and that there would be no smell. That is not the case. It claimed that while it had a smokestack, it would be a closed-loop system, yet an emissions test report prepared for Bravin contradicts this. In fact, along with carbon dioxide, it's emitting carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxides, sulfur dioxide, and particulate matter. The report also found that Bravin would emit an estimated 5.14 tons of volatile organic compounds per year. It produced and moved 400 containers of hazardous waste without a permit over 2 years. Bravin staff admitted that personnel had not conducted weekly inspections nor present an emergency contingency plan to our emergency authorities so that if some kind of disaster were to happen, we would know how to handle it. As part of the remediation plan that the Department of Environmental Quality required Bravin to test stormwater and soil, 4 of the contaminated samples tested positive for high concentrations of benzene. We've been fooled. We've been misled. And we have children right down the street from this facility. We have people that live behind this facility. This is unacceptable. We should feel terrible about it. And we need to take steps to make sure that they stop polluting. Stop with the runoff into our stormwater. Stop contaminating our soils and stop emitting particulate matter into our air. You cannot take lead and create gold. You cannot take plastics and safely turn them into fuel. The Bravin facility is one of only 7 facilities in the United States that's operating in this capacity. I'm going to put the article that was written by Skylar Mitchell out on the internet so that the citizens of Zebulon can become more informed about what we have going on in our backyard. Thank you.
Commissioner Laux.
I hate to add to that, being a Debbie or David Downer, but a couple things I want to say from this chair. We've dodged a 45-day bullet with the federal government that I think everybody better start waking up. We're currently $33 trillion in debt, and the federal government has a $3.1 trillion operating budget. So we owe 11 times what our operating budget is. On top of that, the last hour we sat here, we added $800 million to the federal debt in just 1 hour, and we're currently paying $2 billion a day in interest and have not touched the principal. I bring this up to everybody because this is not only going to bite you in the butt, it's going to bite little towns like Zebulon in the butt. This debt cannot continue. There is going to be major cutbacks and hurt. So everybody needs to pay attention to what's going on in Washington, D.C., because we have a piper to pay, and it's going to be painful for everybody.
Thank you. I would just like to
Commissioner Harrison.
issue. I'm sorry. Commissioner Harris, go ahead.
Lift us up.
I wasn't. Okay. So, thank you so much, Mayor. First, I wanted to, excuse me. First, I want to say thank you to each and every person and organization that gave for our coat giveaway last week. The coats came, the event started, and the coats were gone within a few moments. So I hope that our community was able to benefit from that, and I'm grateful that we were able to do that and to sponsor so many families. So thank you. Echoing Commissioner Baxter's reminder about Faith in Blue, I want to let you all know that I have a very big challenge out with Officer Mazingo on who can hula hoop the longest. So please come out and see, but put your money on Officer Mazingo. And lastly, I just wanted to read a statement that I wrote. As a Zebulon native, I fully understand the frustrations our community is feeling about the cancellation of the Christmas parade. The parade is a long-standing tradition in our town that brought our community together. My hope is that we will continue to work with key partners and stakeholders to navigate these new logistics and continue our incredible Christmas parade for years to come. I am grateful to the Zebulon Chamber of Commerce for partnering with our amazing Parks and Rec Department to map out what looks like an incredible alternative to the parade for this year. Deck the Hall seeks to blend old and new traditions together, brings new levels of fanfare and excitement, and will allow us to gather together as a community, something that can never be replaced. While there is nothing that can replace our Christmas parade, the time is now to start planning for what could be a bigger and better event in the years to come and paving the way for what will bring back this tradition to Zebulon. Thank you.
Thank you. I would just like to remind everyone of the passing of our former mayor, Ralph Lewis. He passed away last week, and I think you've all got the information about his services. He was our mayor from 1975 to 1981. Condolences to his family. Thank you. That's all I have.
All right, before I introduce department directors, and I should have thought about this when I put it in here, you'll get your development update. You will not get a human resources update. I forgot that Ms. Markland is at the Municipal Personnel Officers Conference today and tomorrow. So I've asked her to present to you all at next week's work session. And with that, I'll follow up with the financial report as well as a community event for later this week. But first, let me recognize Michael Clark of the Planning Department.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the board. As always with the development report, the easiest way to really understand what's going on in Zebulon is to start with our interactive development map. One thing that we've done a little bit different, let me find it here. Okay, there we go. The interactive development map can be found on the middle of the planning website. Just click on there, and then view full dashboard is probably the easiest way to view it. We'll expand this out. One of the items that's going to be coming before you next week for joint public hearing will be a project called Chambly Lake. It is located adjacent to Sydney Creek. And I want to take this as a moment to kind of give a preview of what folks can expect to see in future development updates. This is the first of the rollouts. Previously, when you clicked on this view button here, it'd bring up the plan set. However, thanks to assistance with staff, we're actually bringing it into a full page. They'll provide a detailed description of what the development is, what the status currently is, a rendering, whether it's a plan sheet or this is a rendering out of their plan development document, as well as a detailed analysis of the flow chart or the kind of timeline of activities that needed to occur. Additionally, each of these are an independent link, so you'll be able to click on the first submittal, the second submittal, the third submittal, as well as the public hearing notification, as well as going all the way back to the original neighborhood meeting. This is in an effort to provide the greatest level of transparency from our department out to the general public. Finally, at the very bottom, it does show what the next item of consideration is. Following the joint public hearing, it would come back before you for consideration. Once that is made, if the board approves this, any minutes that are associated with it, once those get approved, the final copy of the approved drawings, as well as the ordinance that will be signed by the mayor if this particular project gets approved, all of that information will be uploaded. This is the first of many that will be created. Due to the number of projects, we're unable to just do a complete switchover. So this will be a progression with the main focus based on what will be coming before you for public hearings, and because those are going to be the items of greatest question regarding for the public. So that will be coming before you for next week for the joint public hearing. Not too far after that, we're not sure if it's going to be November or December for joint public hearing. The development known as Zebulon South, located in between Arundel and Wakefield Street, just south of the solar farm, that's going to be a residential mixed product neighborhood. So it's going to be a combination of multiple lot widths and housing types, including a connection, road connection in between the two major arterials. Other items, we're still working with the developer to find out where the future, if this is going to move forward for Wakelawn Mills. But we have been in active conversations with the Faison tract, which is this development here located off of Gannon Road. As you recall, there's approval in our neighboring community of Wendell. Just south of that, we want to make sure that that we're putting our best foot forward, especially being that this will be the first time that we'll have two developments in adjacent communities joining up to each other. I have been told that our development regulations are more strict, which I'll definitely take as a good thing. Outside of that, we haven't had a lot of new projects coming forward. One of the questions that have been brought up a few weeks ago, though, was in regard to the future of Tractor Supply. As you recall, Tractor Supply did receive conditional zone or regular rezoning approval as well as annexation, and we've been working with the applicant. It sounds like they're in the final details of negotiating cross-access utility easements to be able to provide water and sewer to the site. Their initial agreement fell through with an adjacent property owner, so they had to look for other solutions, and it sounds like that's getting wrapped up. Additionally, we anticipate November submittal for a mixed-use project. This will be the first of the full mixed use. Well, this one will have commercial, potentially some office, as well as multifamily residential. With that, I'm available if you have any questions.
Commissioner Miles?
One question I think I posed you before.
Sure.
I get a lot of questions from citizens about where do we stand with like your grocery stores and the infrastructure, things of that nature. Where do we stand with that, Mike? Can you, for the public, kind of like give a little bit of elaboration on what we're kind of looking at now?
I can tell you that there's at least 2 grocery stores that have us kind of on the radar, one of which they're waiting to see where our median family income goes before they really commit to anything else. The other one, I'm not positive where they stand. That's really going to be dependent upon what other development occurs, our growth rates, and all of that. But it is something that as our growth continues and as more families start moving to Zebulon, we're being recognized by more and more grocers as a potential location.
Good.
Thank you.
Question. Just for clarity, and so that we can say it in a public forum, there's more chicken signs out. And most recently, we have a sign somewhere in Zebulon that says that we have a Chick-fil-A coming to Zebulon, and it's a lot of buzz on social media. Could you please speak to that if you've heard? It's been a topic of conversation on social media for the last few days.
If we have a Chick-fil-A coming, that is news to me. Nobody from their office has contacted myself or my staff.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments for the planning board? Thank you. Thank you. Manager's report.
Thank you again. So you will not receive a human resources update. We'll have that available to you at next week's work session. The monthly financial report is included as an addendum. I wasn't going to go through that, but I was going to highlight at least one thing. If you take a look at the revenue projections for the last fiscal year, it looks like we're coming in ahead of schedule, so you'll get a better sense when the audit is delivered on how much your general fund balance has grown. Speaking of the audit and the auditors, they're wrapping things up, so we're going through and finding if there's any additional information that they need from us. And then the last thing, I did not list this on the agenda, but I did want to talk about ribbon cutting for the sidewalk improvement project on West Gannon and Church Street. That's this Friday at 10 o'clock. Is that correct? Yep, get the thumbs up. And I wanted to use that as a way, this is a tangible example of the strategic plan at work. So one of the focus areas, which is small town life, one of the goals within that focus area is to connect people. And connections through placemaking like downtown or parks is a way to do that, but also connecting people through sidewalks so they can get from their neighborhood to commercial districts or to public facilities like parks and community centers. So this sidewalk that there's going to be a ribbon cutting on Friday is a tangible example of the strategic plan at work. With that, I stand available to answer any questions that the board may have.
Any questions from the board? Hearing none? Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight and speak. Oh,
one second. I did one more question, Joe. I think in a monthly meeting while you come back, you were going to give us a brief update on the branding aspect. I think we talked about that briefly in a monthly meeting. Yeah, stated you give an update today.
That was at a future meeting. I want to get that prepared. What I was just doing is, so what Commissioner Miles is referring to for the full board and also anyone listening, I want to come back before you to give the board and the community by extension an update on where we are on the branding process and what the next steps are, but I haven't identified when that meeting is. I just want to let the board know I'm working on that.
All right, thank you, Joe.
Any other questions from the board? Comments? I'd like to thank everyone to come out tonight to our meeting. We always enjoy seeing faces from the public and welcome your input in our decision making. If there's nothing else to call our attention, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Miles, and thank you, Commissioner Harrison, for the second. All in favor? Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Look, I didn't even try.